Hello everybody, welcome back to today's video. Today, on this video, we're going to be going over the U.S. Senate map prediction for the 2026 midterms for the Republicans' best case scenario. Now, I encourage you guys to watch the video of the Democrats' best case scenario, but today we're going to be doing it for the Republicans. I hope you guys all had a good Christmas and are prepared to have a good New Year's. Enough with that, though. Again, this will be about the Republicans' best case scenario. I am taking into account that in the normal way of this election panning out, the Democrats should at least be slightly favored, just because they're the party out of power. However, now, this will assume that Republicans match similar to the 2024 margins, or even do slightly better or slightly worse than before. We'll first start out with the safe states that Republicans and Democrats should win, really, without any problem. For the Democrats, no matter what, they should be winning Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey. We'll assume Cory Booker still wins by over 10, and Delaware. Colorado would be safe, and I'd say for now that is it for the safe Democratic states. We'll now move on to the safe Republican states. They'll be going Republican no matter what. Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska. We will assume that Dan Osborne does not have the momentum he did in 2024 to make the race at least somewhat competitive. We'll assume that Pete Ricketts wins this by over 10. Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia. We'll assume that Iowa goes just barely over 10 points. Since Ashley Hinson does seem to be a good candidate, we would assume she would do well. And we will also throw in Texas as safe, and Alaska, all for the best Republican case scenario. Those are going to be all the competitive states. We will move on to likely. New Mexico would just be barely under 10. You see their other Democratic senator, I believe Benry Lujan, he is not as strong of an incumbent as his other fellow Democratic senator from New Mexico. He won by he was more electable. However, New Mexico is the blue enough state; he shouldn't really have much of a problem winning re-election. Another likely Democratic state would be Virginia. You've seen how Virginia tends to be pretty liberal, especially on the federal level, and if you factor in the statewide level, it definitely leans to the left. However, could go Republican or become competitive for the right reasons. However, I just don't see it happening. You saw how Democrats really kind of rebounded a lot of their momentum, especially in 2025. You're even able to see Jason Miyares, their Attorney General, the Republican, lose re-election. So you see how Democrats are starting to kind of really come back. This would just be barely under 10. Mark Warner would probably win by just probably 9 percentage points. That is basically it there. Another likely, I'm teetering on likely and leans. We'll just probably have it as, I'll just keep it as likely, just because of that. Yeah, I'll have it as likely Democrat as Minnesota. Don't seem to be any Republicans don't really seem to be challenging that race. We'll see who wins the nomination there, but that is all for the likely Democratic states. Likely Republican, right off the bat, I'll start with Ohio. Usually it would be a safe Republican state, especially at the federal level. However, the Democrats are running Sherrod Brown, and he is a strong candidate, so I think in the best case Republican scenario, John Huston would win by just under 10 points. I think it just going above 10 is just slightly too out of the question. I mean, could it happen? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Huston is a pretty strong incumbent. I just think that since Democrats are at least going to be trying to put some money into this race, they're going to be trying to compete here. I think that you'll definitely see a somewhat competitive race in the regular scenario. I just think this would be just barely under 10. kind of like Virginia, just barely under 10 for the Democrats. That is probably about it. I would throw in Maine as likely as possible. Susan Collins wins by over 10. I just don't see it happening just because of the partisanship of the state. We would assume that she overcomes the national environment and wins by a likely margin, just barely under 10, like she did in 2020. Um, Actually, the environment is probably going to be similar to 2020. Not as blue as 2018, but still on the bluer side. Definitely, Democrats should be slightly favored. Um, you see Susan Collins win by high single digits. This is definitely plausible if she runs against the Democrats put up Graham Plattner, who doesn't seem to be as strong of a candidate as Democrat Governor Janet Mills. We're going to really have to see how that primary goes. That'll be very interesting. But that is about it for that. Now we will do lean states. There's no lean Democrat states in this scenario, oddly enough. But we'll do the tilt Democrat states. There's one of them, that is New Hampshire. I could see this going Republican. Republicans are running John Sununu, who is popular within that within New Hampshire. It's the Sununu name. It's popular there. He could actually win. I just don't see it happening just because of the situation, and you see how Democrats are running a strong candidate, Congressman Chris Pappas, who overperformed the top of the ticket in his narrow Harris district. I think if it was a more redder year, it could be tilt Republican. I just think that on the federal level, New Hampshire was just slightly too out of reach. It is a Kamala Harris +2 state, so definitely winnable for Republicans. At the state level, it's pretty conservative. You have the Republican governor there, Republican legislator. But, on the federal level, it does lean Democrat. And, that's just basically how it goes. New Hampshire is more blue on the federal level. That's just typically how it is. Chris Pappas would just barely get away by the skin of his teeth in this situation. That is about it. And then the rest of the categories will all be lean Republican states. You would have Georgia. We'll start from bottom to top. Georgia would probably, John Ossoff would be knocked off probably around 1 to 3 points. This would be assuming that there is no need for a runoff. The problem is that if there is a runoff, John Ossoff does have a better chance at winning because, you could see how John Ossoff, the Democrat incumbent senator, is a strong incumbent. There's reasons to believe that, but there's also doubts as to how strong of a incumbent he actually is. And the reason why I believe that is that I believe in 2017 he was running for a special election in like a Trump +1 district, and he still lost. And that wasn't a good showing for him. You also see how in 2020 he did take down David Perdue, which was very impressive. That was kind of an upset. However, that was only winning the runoff election. The first round, which David Perdue actually beat John Ossoff by 3 points. It was a plurality of the vote, but he still lost by 3 points. So he isn't the super strong Democratic incumbent that he's cracked up to be. I definitely still think he's the best positioned Democrat to win, and Democrats should absolutely be happy if they have an incumbent running. However, I don't think is this juggernaut as they say he is. He's not. He's definitely not guaranteed to win. In this scenario, you would see him lose the first round. There wouldn't be a need to a runoff. He would probably lose by a few points, kind of like how he did in 2020. If there is a runoff, he'd probably win the runoff. That's what he did in 2020, but it was obviously very interesting to look at. But definitely we'll be keeping an eye on Georgia. But in this scenario, you would see Georgia go lean Republican. Another thing with this would be North Carolina, another lean Republican state. Democrats are running a pretty strong candidate, Roy Cooper, who was the governor of North Carolina. He left office this year, but he served 2 terms as Democrat governor. He is proven to be a strong candidate. There's no doubt about it. He won in 2016 to take out a Republican candidate. He took out Pat McCrory or something. He was the Republican governor at the time in 2016, and despite Donald Trump winning North Carolina, despite the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate winning in North Carolina, Roy Cooper was able to win, which is pretty impressive. He later won by 4 points in 2020 when Donald Trump won the state by 1 point. So he's a strong Democrat candidate. He was also served as the Attorney General. They're pretty well established. Democrats are absolutely celebrating that. Republicans are running Michael Whatley, who was involved with the RNC. So, the Republicans argue with Michael Whatley that he's good with fundraising and running campaigns. It's hard to say. It's a hot take, but I kind of believe that Roy Cooper is just as strong as John Ossoff, if not slightly more. Both are strong candidates the Democrats are running. I just think these races could be kind of competitive. We'll just have to see how favored the Democrats could possibly be, just because they're the party out of power. We would assume, though, in this scenario for the Republicans, that Michael Whatley would be able to defeat Roy Cooper by a few points. As the case on that, we now have Michigan. Michigan at the top, which is already going to be very interesting. You have Mike Rogers, the Republican, running. I've explained this before. You have him running against a slew of Democrats. The primary is really divided, and I just think it's going to hurt them. There's a lot of debate between which Democrat is the strongest. We would assume that in this scenario, the Democrats would be divided, and because of the primary, their candidate will be weakened, and Mike Rogers would be able just to have enough momentum to defeat the Democrat by about a point. It's really hard to say what's going to happen, but that is basically how it pans out to be in the U.S. Senate. You'd have Mike Rogers win there. This is obviously not the actual prediction. This is just to see if Republicans did really well. This would be their best case scenario. Again, I did a video like this about the Democrats' best case scenario, so I encourage you to check that out. This is just to see how the Senate would go in these circumstances, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. I hope to see you in the next video.